Billy Bragg is a unique musician, singer, songwriter, author, and progressive political activist who, over his 40 years of making music, has incorporated many genres into his songs, ranging from traditional folk music to punk rock that features both stirring protest and labor solidarity anthems and deeply personal reflections on his own sometimes tragic life experience. In 2023, Billy celebrated 40 years of making music and political activism with the release of a 14 CD box set titled The Roaring 40, 1983 to 2023, that includes a 64-page booklet about his career. Billy's most recent album is titled A Million Things That Never Happened, and he's the author of the best-selling book Roots, Radicals, and Rockers: How Skiffle Changed the World. Billy was honored in 2018 with the Outstanding Contribution to British Music Award and has had a street named after him in his hometown, Barking, East London in the UK. Billy, thanks so much for making time to join us today.
My pleasure. Pleased to be here, man.
I know you're preparing for your next leg of your US tour that will bring you to our area here in our radio station listening area on Tuesday, October 15th, where you're going to be playing Norwalk, Connecticut's District Music Hall. And as we get started, Billy, I wanted to mention something that happened way back, maybe 10 to 15 years ago. We met for an interview in New Haven, Connecticut, and I have a fond memory of you and I walking down one of the streets on the Yale University campus when some idiots in a loud pickup truck zoomed past us and someone screamed out the window, "Bleep you, you bleeping Yales." And you, of course, you immediately protested by screaming back at these guys, "I ain't no bleeping Yaley." And I'll always remember that as being a great, fun time, unexpected time with you, and a great lead into our interview that happened later that night.
Yeah, when people shout stuff in the street, it's always a bit. I was on we were on a night off on the last trip I was over just before the Newport Folk Festival, and we were out looking for a restaurant. It was getting a bit late. We were in, where were we? Beacon, New York, maybe. And the four of us were all looking at our phones, trying to work out where this place was. And someone went by and yelled, "Get off your phones." And if I could have stopped the guy, I said, "Look, mate, we've just spent the last 5 days in a van together, okay?"
Mm-hmm.
We really don't need to be connecting with each other. We're trying to find somewhere to get some food before nighttime. So you shouldn't just shout shit at people from cars.
No, that's not a good. I loved your response. First, congratulations on your inspirational 40-year career and the release of the Roaring 40 box set. It's an incredible collection of songs from important eras in your musical life. On your current tour, will you be playing a lot of your songs from across the years, or focusing on some of your newer material? And I know there's always a discussion with artists about, do you do what your audience wants to hear, or does it matter? I mean, I'm wondering how you navigate that.
I think you have to give them a bit of what they'd like to hear. If they came along and I played a load of songs they'd never heard of before, I think they'd feel a bit sorry about that, particularly my audience who've been around for a while with me. But I like to try and mix it up. I've got a couple of hours to perform. So in that time, I should be able to reach, most corners of my back catalogue. And some songs they might not have heard before. I mean, I wrote a song last year in response to Anthony Oliver's "Rich Men North of Richmond" that hasn't been released at all. It's just knocking around on YouTube, and it's been going down a storm with audiences in America this year. So there'll be new stuff as well as some of the old classics.
Well, on another topic, along with lots of other folks and music fans, I was so thankful for your Mermaid Avenue records, where you, along with Jeff Tweedy and the band Wilco, recorded the songs of legendary American folk artist Woody Guthrie. For years now on my radio show, I frequently play "All You Fascists" when we're discussing Donald Trump or a whole range of other characters and the threat to democracy. That song is timeless, unfortunately, right?
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah. But I wonder if you tell our audience about how the Mermaid Avenue project came together. And I know it primarily happened through Woody's daughter, Nora Guthrie.
Yeah, her generosity, really. It really should be called Nora Guthrie Presents Mermaid Avenue, with a little bit of help from Billy Bragg and Wilco, because it really is her vision. Basically, she grew up with boxes around the house of songs her father had often typewritten. He did as a teenager, he did a correspondence course on typing. He was a very good typist, very fast typist, but and that's how he mostly wrote. And he wrote literally thousands of songs, although we have about probably around 100 or so songs of his recorded. He literally wrote 3,000 odd songs that were complete songs, complete lyrics. But unfortunately, like myself, he wasn't particularly musical in the sense that he didn't write musical notation.
Mhm.
And what that means is if I write a song now, what you would get physically is a piece of paper with words on it. Now, those words would rhyme and they would scan, but unless you were in the room when I wrote the song, you probably wouldn't have any idea of the tune. The tune's in my head.
Right.
That's fine if I record it relatively quickly, but if, like Woody, you didn't get in a recording studio very often, you end up writing loads and loads of songs, which you're keeping the tunes in your head. And when you pass away in 1967, having been incapacitated by a debilitating disease for almost a decade,
Yeah.
then those tunes have gone forever.
Yeah.
And Nora's vision was to get some new people in to look at these lyrics, which are incredible lyrics. You already discussed one, or All You Fascists Bound to Lose. You know, there are others where Woody talks about riding in a flying saucer, making love to Ingrid Bergman on the slopes of an Italian volcano, going out with two sailor buddies chasing women, one of whom was the niece, allegedly, of Walt Whitman, although we can't remember which one. I mean, there's so much stuff in there. It's just an incredible cornucopia of lyrics. And Nora invited myself, and then I had a word with Jeff Tweedy and said he might be interested in doing this, to look at these lyrics and see if we could come up with a new framing for them. Because, I mean, basically that's what we kind of did. We come up with new tunes and gave the songs a platform, a framework in which people to appreciate them. You know, because it's the words of All You Fascists that you and your listeners are appreciating, not so much my very basic free chords and me and the Wilco's music of it. It's the power is in the words. And it's the same with all of them, like Way Over Yonder in the minor key, or even California Stars.
Right.
It's the vibe, that's in there. And Woody put that in, that's all still there. And so what we tried to do was to make an album of those songs. But what happened was, there's so much great stuff. We ended up recording like 55 songs. So we ended up making 3 albums, not from those sessions, not 3 albums in a row. They came out in a row, but they all come from the same, 4-month period when we were working on the project.
Mm-hmm.
And we did what Nora Guthrie commissioned us to do, which was she asked us to kind of reboot her father's image. And I think we achieved that with the Mermaid Avenue project, introduced him to a new generation, and also gave confidence to other artists who, when they were approached by Nora to do more of these lyrics, were able to say, oh yeah, this works. Because I'll be honest with you, beforehand, Nora had asked a few people that you might think of as being the usual suspects to make a record of Woody's lyrics. And they were all a little bit intimidated by Woody. And I think it helped that coming from a different country, I didn't kind of grow up with Woody Guthrie. I learned his songs through osmosis, through listening to other singer-songwriters like Bob Dylan. So I kind of saw him one step removed. And I think that allowed me to, with Nora's encouragement and generosity, to really get in there and not worry if I knocked Woody down off of his pedestal, because, I mean, that's what Nora wanted us to do. She was concerned that her father was becoming an icon and was becoming kind of, I think she said to me that he'd been captured by academics.
Mm.
He wasn't that guy. That's not who he was. He was an iconoclast. And she felt that the real Woody was still there in the lyrics. And it's true. If you think about it, what other great poet or great artist of the 20th century, 90% of his or her output has not yet been seen or heard. It's an incredible thing to take on, and amazing. Woody wrote a song called Pastures of Plenty. I always thought maybe we should have called the album that, because that's what the archive is, Pastures of Plenty.
Right.
And I'm just pleased that people got it. You know, when we first played these songs to people, their response was so positive that I think, I mean, we put a lot into it, me and the guys from Wilco, we put ourselves into it, and it worked. It really, really worked. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of in my career,
Mm,
mostly because I feel we've done right by Nora. She was incredibly generous to allow us to take her father's material and do whatever we wanted to do with it.
right.
And I like to think that we paid her back by doing what she, helping her to realize her um, uh, project, her focus, which was to reboot her father's image.
Yeah. Woody Guthrie doesn't belong in a museum.
Exactly. Although there is a Woody Guthrie Museum in
Right.
Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Apart from that, I remember I first heard about Woody Guthrie. I was playing uh, guitars. I was just learning guitar with a guy down the street in junior high school or something, and he had "This Machine Kills Fascists" on his
Yeah,
guitar, just like Woody
yeah.
Guthrie. I said, "What's
What
that
an
about?"
amazing,
And that's
what an
so I
amazing,
heard about.
yeah.
W- As I understand it, Billy, you cut your teeth on protest music during the punk rock era, but really became politically active during the 1984 UK coal miners' strike and the battle between Britain's unions and the working class and Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, the late Margaret Thatcher. Tell us about your time briefly playing songs for the miners and how that changed your political outlook and your music, such as writing one of your most popular songs, "There's Power in a Union." Another one of your songs I play frequently on my show.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Well, you know, I kind of had politics. I was politicized by Rock Against Racism in 1977 during punk rock. You know, I went along to the first big Rock Against Racism gig, The Clash were playing, Tom Robinson, Steel Pulse, X-Ray Specs. And that kind of politicized me in that sense. But in 1984, I just put out my first album. I was kind of a solo singer-songwriter, um, out of the punk mode, but also with some points of reference with the classic 60s singer-songwriters who were also writing about, you know, topical issues. And I thought to myself, well, you know, I fervently believed that music could change the world. And now I had an opportunity to find out if it can by, I mean, that, you know, obviously this was my fight. This was my class that was up against the wall here with the miners. And Margaret Thatcher was clearly my class enemy. So I was going to get involved in some way. But as a musician who was just coming into his first flush of fame, I had an opportunity to use my platform to do something other than just sell records and T-shirts. So I embraced that struggle. I didn't expect it to last for a year, but it included the year in which I first came to the United States of America in August 1984 and toured opening for Echo and the Bunnymen. And that introduced me to, oddly, Woody Guthrie, because you couldn't really buy Woody's records in the UK. I mean, I knew who he was and I knew his songs, but I'd known them through cover versions, and I was finally able to buy Woody's records. The average American record store, mum and pop store, had so many great records in it you couldn't get in the UK, and among them was Woody's records. But I was also introduced to the songs of Joe Hill, the Swedish American union songwriter for the International Workers of the World, the IWW, from the first decade or second decade of the 20th century. And I'd never heard of Joe. And I got an album of his songs by Utah Phillips I bought and took that home.
Right.
And that kind of plugged me into that tradition of union songs. So I suddenly thought, well, you know, I could write a song like this to fit into the struggle that is going on in my country. So I borrowed the title from one of Joe's songs, from one of Joe Hill's songs that was on that Utah Phillips album, There Is Power in a Union.
Mhm.
And I borrowed the tune from, actually, I borrowed it from a song from the American Civil War, a Union song, which is alternatively known as the Battle Cry of Freedom, or sometimes called Rally Round the Flag. And I was so pleased to find out years later that that tune was stolen from an English hymn. So I kind of, it's kind of cultural reappropriation. But that's
Yep.
what folk music is. You take old tunes. I mean, Woody, that was one of the interesting things about Woody. Woody very seldom wrote his own tunes. He often wrote songs to previously existing tunes that everybody knew so that he could sing his songs and everybody could join in. You know, he was that kind of busking kind of guy. So in that kind of Woody tradition, I wrote There Is Power in a Union. And I'm pleased to say it resonated.
Very definitely.
And it gave me the experience of going and playing in the coalfields in the north of England, in Scotland, in South Wales, forced me to start to try and articulate the views I had in a more ideological way than I had hitherto. So that led me to Right Between the Wars, Which Side Are You On, Power and the Union, those kind of more ideological songs that I probably wouldn't have written had it not been for my experience during the miners' strike. So it kind of, the experience of the miners' strike defined what most people think of as what Billy Bragg is, a singer-songwriter with a socialist politics who's standing on a picket line singing songs. And I do still do that, but it's not the only thing I do. That's only part of what I do.
Well, I wanted to briefly turn to politics. It's, when we look around, it's difficult not to be pessimistic about civilization's future when we have horrific wars in Gaza, where some now 41,000 Palestinians have been killed after the October 7th Hamas terrorist attack in Israel. We've got Russia's war in Ukraine continuing, the conflict now spreading into Russia, a nuclear power, the threats of nuclear weapons being launched. It's frightening. We're also living at a time where fascist leaders like Donald Trump, Nigel Farage, Marine Le Pen, and now the German Alternative for Germany party are gaining popularity. And they're doing it primarily by demonizing immigrants and people of color. Meanwhile, we have, many governments most governments around the world, and most major corporations around the world are doing little or nothing about the climate crisis. And of course, that's due to their insatiable greed. And it's a frightening and very bleak time in the world. And I'm wondering, what gives you hope for the future? Because you can't write songs like you do without having hope and having some confidence in the human spirit
Yeah.
to overcome these. And I just wanted to mention a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King here to see if you think this is right or accurate here. He famously said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Are you a believer in that?
I am actually, I would say the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards inclusivity.
Mhm.
Over time, more and more people who have been condemned as and vilified as outsiders are accepted inside. You know, how working men got the vote, women got the vote, people of color overcome Jim Crow, gay marriage was legalized. And when you look at that long arc of history, you can see that we are making progress. And in some ways, I see the rise of people like Donald Trump and the AfD and Farage as pushing back against the progress we've made, as trying to turn the clock back to a time when it was difficult for people of color to vote, when women didn't have bodily autonomy, when working men were exploited without any rights in the workplace. It seems to me that the sort of policies that are encompassed in Project 2025 are all trying to turn back the clock to a time when white men were in charge of everything and nobody questioned them. And I think that really the tide of history is running the opposite way. This is the last gasp of these kind of people. Clearly someone like Putin is trying to restore the Russian Empire. That's gone. They can't even knock over Ukraine on their own. I can't imagine they're going to be a huge threat to the rest of Europe and the United States of America.
Great.
What is troubling, and what I think we do really need to worry about, is the lack of focus on issues such as climate change, which are going to affect all of us and have a knock-on effect on all of the things we've just talked about, because people are going to need to move. Huge numbers of people are going to need to move to places where they can raise their family. But as a socialist, as a progressive, I think you have to see the glass is half full, because fundamentally, at the absolute bedrock of our ideological ideas is empathy, is caring for other people. And I think that's the difference between ourselves and the likes of Donald Trump. The man has absolutely no empathy. He cares not one jot for anybody else. And there'll always be people like that. The world has always seen those kind of people. But ultimately, you can appeal to the greater good, where people come together to make common cause to overcome a problem. And you saw it during the lockdown. Despite the noisy anti-vaxxers and people who complained about the mask mandate, the majority of people did the right thing. They recognized that it made sense to both to protect themselves, but to protect other people, to do that. And so I see, I don't know about how it was where you live, but where I lived, I'd say a month after the mask mandate ended, people were still wearing masks in our local big supermarket.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I went in there, people had the mask on, so I flipped my mask out, put it on again. I'm like, clearly these people care about their health and about the health of others. And I think that seeing during the pandemic that people were willing to do things they didn't normally do, like wear a mask, or do things they perhaps didn't want to do, like get vaccinated, so that if they did get ill, the chances are they weren't going to need an intensive care unit bed, and take that away from someone who really, really did need it because their immune system is not up to sniff. I saw that as a encouraging expression of the common good. And because if we're not able to manifest that sort of willingness to do things we don't normally do, and perhaps sometimes do things we don't want to do, then we have absolutely no chance of overcoming the climate crisis that we all face. So I was encouraged by a lot of what happened in the pandemic, and my experience with regard to the victories that the forces of those people trying to turn back the clock, when they think they do something like they fill the Supreme Court with yes men and women, and when they deliver the thing that everyone says they want, it turns out that the average American doesn't want that. And when they have a referendum on the rights of abortion, they're defeated. The anti-abortionists are defeated. So I think we have to take encouragement from that. I think the election in the US is going to be very close this year. I don't think we can be in any way complacent. But I think the Republicans are being foolish if they don't think that having Donald Trump as a candidate and having a mini-me like J.D. Vance as the vice presidential candidate is not going to motivate millions and millions of women to come out and vote against them. Trump has really bad numbers with women. He always has done. And when he chose Vance for the ticket, I thought, man, that's mad. His attitude to women is even worse. You're going to just make things worse. And sure enough, that has happened. Now they're getting desperate. They're running on memes. They're running on the old, and I say it is a racist trope. I've heard that the immigrants from Kosovo were eating the swans on the lake behind my mother's house in Barking, where I grew up. She told me that back in the 1990s. That whole idea that the immigrants are coming and eating the ducks and the swans, it's an old racist trope.
Yeah.
And anyone with half a brain could see it's, why would you do such a stupid thing as eat a dog and a cat when you can easily shoplift food from a supermarket? It's a ridiculous concept. I mean, think about it. Or go in the woods and shoot a deer. I mean, forget it. I mean, just think about it. That's the thing with these people. They don't think these things through. They just take them as absolute gospel and make themselves look ridiculous. I mean, I don't think there was any greater image of the way that things are going to go in America, of that split screen of Trump raging about dogs and cats and Kamala Harris just laughing at him,
right?
Literally laughing at him. I mean, that to me, that gives me hope. That gives me hope, because I think probably all the women in America were with Kamala, and the majority of men who have any sense of dignity, any sense of empathy, any sense of the difference between right and wrong, were also laughing with her, perhaps in embarrassment.
Well, Billy, I think we have time for one more question here.
Actually, I've just received a text while we were speaking. You may have heard it come bing to say that my following interview isn't going to turn up. So let's have another 10 minutes.
Very good. All right. I'm all for it. Thank you.
Cool.
Through your years of writing and performing songs, these 4 decades, you've understood more than most the power of music in the fight for social justice. And you've used that power in the writing of your songs. I've read that you don't necessarily believe that music can change the world, but it does have the power to communicate important political and deeply personal messages that can bring people together, as you just said a moment ago, and provide a sense of solidarity, like in a union or a strike or any of these these moments in time where people come together. And it's powerful. Music is so powerful, and it communicates in a different way than words. And I know you've articulated this in many ways. I wonder if you just share with our audience the power you see and have used and experienced in music.
My sense of the power that music has is based on my own personal experience at Rock Against Racism. I went to that gig because I was against racism, but also, the Clash were playing, as I mentioned, Tom Robinson. But when I got to the venue, we marched through East London to a park, Victoria Park in Hackney. There were 80,000 kids just like me. And I realized that day that I was not alone in my concerns about society. And when I went back to work on Monday morning, I decided that it was about time I stood up for what I believed in and didn't laugh and joke with the casual racism, sexism, and homophobia that was in the office where I worked. And the important thing about that is that the courage of my convictions wasn't delivered to me by the Clash. It was actually came from seeing all those kids just like me and realizing that my generation were going to define themselves in the way the previous generation had defined themselves in opposition to Vietnam. We were going to define ourselves in opposition to discrimination of all kinds. That was who we were. That was why I was different from these older guys who were making these snide remarks in the office. And that's the solidarity I'm talking about. That solidarity in the park there around that issue that had been brought together by music that wasn't manifested anywhere other than at this gig. Right. That solidarity, you can take that solidarity home with you. And I know that because I experienced it. So I know that I'm not talking in an abstract way when I say music can change the world or music can't change the world. That's an abstract. The truth is Woody's guitar didn't actually kill fascists. It's an idea. It's an idea, powerful idea, so powerful that we still talk about it, And the idea that music can change the world is also a powerful idea. But my own experience is that it has no agency. And, if any of your listeners have been going around the world for 40 years singing political songs, trying to change the world through music, let them write in now and tell me different. I'm open to hearing anyone who wants to shout me down. But this is my experience. But what I do know is that from a gig, you can take a sense of communion, a sense of connection, a sense of solidarity around an issue that's being articulated at that moment that fires you up to go away and put into practice your beliefs, that can recharge your activism. Mm-hmm. And that's my job every night. That's what I'm trying to do. Because I'll tell you what, when I come off stage after that audience have all sung There Is Power in the Union with their fists in the air, my activism is really recharged. I'm 100%, and my cynicism is temporarily kicked to the curb. Right. And my job, as well as entertaining people and selling them a t-shirt, is to send them home with their activism recharged as well. And I think that's a much more powerful thing than the idea of me singing a song is going to change anything. In some way, that's a lame idea that allows the audience off the hook. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to fire up my punters. I'm trying to get them to, some of them who've been around as long as me, I'm trying to get them to re-engage and overcome their cynicism, because perhaps cynicism is a greater enemy for those of us who want to make a better world than capitalism or conservatism ever was, Our own cynicism, our own sense that nobody cares about this stuff. Well, when you're in an audience and they're all cheering the idea of trans rights, they're all cheering the idea of, there's power in a union. You can overcome your cynicism through that. You can put it to one side and feel you're part of something again and go out and do whatever it is you can to make that better world. And I think that is how music makes the difference, not by changing the world, but by making you believe that the world can be changed. And that is a great power to have in and of itself.
Well said. And along those same lines, as you get older, along with the rest of us, you've steadfastly held onto your radical, egalitarian, and democratic socialist ideals. You continue your activism fighting for social justice, and you talk with your audience, as you just said, about the major issues we face. But then there's that tired old adage that I know you and the audience have heard. If you're a liberal when you're young, you have no heart. And if you are not a conservative when you're old, you have no brain. And while it's true when we get older, we get stuck in our worldview that was developed when we were young and often don't keep up with constant societal change and major shifts in how new generations view the world. As your once politically active audience ages, do you take it upon yourself to remind them and encourage them to be open to new ideas and retain their ideal or rekindle their idealism to be part of building a more just world? And maybe you could give some examples of how you communicate those ideas, on a personal level, but also as you perform.
Sure. Well, one example would be I've tweaked the lyrics of Sexuality, my song of allyship with the gay and lesbian community back in the day.
Right.
A woman came up to me at a gig in Boston before the pandemic, said to me after the show, "You know that song you got about going for a drink with a gay man?" I said, "Oh, what, Sexuality?" "Yeah." She said, "Yeah." He said, "It's not a very radical idea, is it really, in the 21st century, going for a drink with a gay man, you know? You really need to update that song. The real fight is here," she said, pointing metaphorically to the trans and non-binary community.
Mhm.
So I went away and I thought, that is absolutely right. It really is. I'm resting on my laurels there. So I did a tiny little tweak to the first verse, where once it said, "Just because you're gay, I won't turn you away. If you stick around, I'm sure we can find some common ground." I now sing, "Just because you're they, I won't turn you away. And if you stick around, I'm sure we can find the right pronoun." Now, it's not a huge change,
Yeah.
but it turns the meaning of the song, into a song of allyship with the trans and non-binary community, who you'll know, anyone who's shown any interest in politics will know, have been the target of the right wing for quite some time now. And in the same way, and often with the exact same um, language and the same examples of, children and toilets and changing rooms and predators. I can show you where they said all that about our gay and lesbian brothers and sisters. Exactly the same tropes.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to say to my audience, many of whom are, as I say, my generation, as you mentioned, we stood in solidarity with our gay and lesbian brothers and sisters, didn't we? And this is the same thing, different day. We really need to up our game on this, because, there's no reason, just because we're old, there's no reason why we can't be as relevant as we were. There's some things we can't do. There's some things we're no longer capable of getting away with.
Right.
But being radical isn't one of them. I mean, that cliche you quoted, if you're old and you're not a conservative, that was written by conservatives. That was,
Yes.
it's one of those things that are trying to justify becoming a reactionary, and I don't claim to have the same radical politics as when I was in my 20s. And on some things I've changed my views. But the fundamental belief in a freedom based on a balance between liberty and accountability that is fundamental to my political beliefs hasn't really changed. In fact, I'd like to think I've refined it. I wrote a book. You very kindly mentioned my book on Skiffle earlier, the Roots, Radicals and Rockers. I've since wrote a book on the notion of freedom called The Three Dimensions of Freedom, where I make the argument that freedom requires not just the liberty to say what you want, but for you to recognize the equality of everybody else to express their opinion, and for those opinions to be accountable to the wider community. Because I fear that the idea of freedom has been denigrated by people like Elon Musk to be nothing more than the right to say whatever you want to say, whenever you want to say it, to whoever you want to say it to, with no comeback. That's not freedom. That's Donald Trump's Twitter feed. And, if we want to live in a free society, we have to have a more mature definition of what freedom is, that empowers every citizen to be able to hold those who have power over them to account, whether that's economic power, social power, political power, but also emotional power as well. It comes into relationships as well. So I think that kind of socialism of the heart, as I called it in Upfield, has become more important to me than the socialism of the head, which is more an ideological definition. I think history has put us in a post-ideological period now, but that doesn't mean because we don't talk in the same language as we did in our teens, we should give up on the politics of our teens. We should be thinking of other ways to articulate them. And anyone with a grasp of history only has to look back to the Reagan years to see situations very similar to what we're finding now from then, and to pick up on those. So yeah, I don't know why some people become more, I would say, not conservative, I would say more cynical as they get older. They start to think everybody's got it in for them. They start to think everyone's just out to make a fast buck. They somehow lose sight of the fundamental humanity of their fellow beings, and that's a sad thing. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff, bad stuff out there, and it is easy to give into it. Myself, I have those times when I feel cynical about things, but I'm in a very fortunate position because when I feel cynical about something, I write a song about it, I go out in the dark with you lot, I sing it, everyone claps, and I don't feel half so bad about it. That's the very fortunate therapeutic aspect of my job. I'm very fortunate in that. But as I said in my earlier answer, I'm trying to offer that same therapy to my audience by reflecting that onto them and stating, in a way that I perhaps didn't in the early days when we took all this stuff for granted. What's happening here is we're experiencing a moment of communion here around an idea. Take some of this home with you. Don't forget, whatever situation you find yourself in at home, at work, or at school after tonight, there's a room full of people in Norwalk who give a shit about this stuff. Don't forget that. That's an important thing in these difficult times.
Well, I wonder if we have time just for one more thing, and I
Sure.
wanted to ask you, while our world is burning both literally and figuratively, who are some of the artists that you admire for their music addressing the daunting and sometimes very complex set of issues we face that you've written about and that a new generation is seeing and dealing with today?
Well, I mean, I see, Taylor Swift just endorsed Kamala Harris. She's going to get a load of nasty stuff on the back of that.
Oh,
I have
yeah.
huge respect for any woman who does that, who stands up. I think Billie Eilish talking about her own problems, both, personally and in terms of a feminist, I have a lot of respect for. I think those people up the more popular end of pop music have so much more to lose. And when someone like Taylor Swift is willing to take a stand, I have to do it. It's my, it's my USP. That's what I do. I'm Billy Bragg.
Right.
I mean, she doesn't have to do it. They don't have to do it, those people. So I respect Beyonce at the Super Bowl, making a point about Black Lives Matter. I'm always happy to see that. And I think it's very important that all the artists I've mentioned here are women. I think, we still live in a fundamentally racist, sexist world. And people like Donald Trump are only making that worse. So when women and women of color do step up and are willing to put their careers on the line to make a statement, I'm always really, really encouraged by that.
Well, Billy, thank you so much for spending this good deal of time with myself and our audience today, and big thanks for your 4 decades of making just brilliant, inspiring music. And best of luck with your tour, which starts up again in Vancouver, British Columbia, as I understand it, on later this month on September 20th. And you're making your way down the West Coast, then across the Midwest, and onto the East Coast, where you'll be playing. Remind our audience again at Norwalk, Connecticut's District Music Hall on October 15th. And then you'll be ending the tour in New York City, then Washington, D.C. And I know people can get a lot more information about the box set, your music, all sorts of things about your writing at billybragg.co.uk, right?
That's exactly it. billybragg.co.uk.
Okay. Well, it's been a very enjoyable 45 minutes, Billy.
And for me too, Scott, I'm glad we were able to chat for a bit. I don't know what happened to the other thing. This is what happens sometimes. You you get a load of interviews lined up. Some turn up and some don't. But I'm looking forward to coming to Norwalk because it's one of the places on the tour I've not been to before. And when you've been touring as I have in America, this year's the 40th anniversary of my first trip to the US when I was opening for Echo and the Bunnymen.
Okay.
And I played in Hartford. One of the first shows was in Hartford, Connecticut. And it was a real relief because I'd spent 2 weeks in New York City in August 1984 playing shows at the Danceteria waiting for the Bunnymen tour to start. And to be perfectly honest with you and your listeners, I thought to myself, you know what, I was doing a 6-week tour with the Bunnymen. I thought, you know what, if the rest of America is like this, I don't know if I can hack it. If it's like this, Jesus Christ. And then we went to Hartford, Connecticut, and I was like, oh, actually, you know what? This is like my hometown. I can deal with this. If it's like this, I think I can manage it. So I have very warm feelings towards Connecticut for that very reason. So I'm looking forward to coming to Norwalk.
Yeah, Norwalk's my hometown, so we're going to be
Cool.
welcoming you there.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, Billy, thanks again. And
My pleasure, mate. Good talking to you. Thanks for having me on.
Take care.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.